Welcome back, Olson Speed Shop. In this episode, we're going to talk about 265 in the 55 and where we're going with it. So, if you watched the last video, you saw here was our original compression readings, and they were very dismal. I mean, I got 40 psi on 5 and 7. The highest one was 68 on 4. I've let it sit for a week. I put Marvel Mystery Oil in it, in the cylinders, no spark plugs. Rotated it around, filled it again. I kept filling it. I was hoping that these numbers would come up. I was hoping they'd come up a lot. They didn't. Did another compression test on it this last Friday. I got maybe a 5 psi increase. The 40s were registering 45 now. Definitely not enough. I threw, just for the giggles, I threw the plugs in it. Still, not even a bark. Not even, it's just not going to start with these compression numbers. So, we're on to this engine. This is a 265 out of a 56 Chevy. I have not done a compression test on this just because it hasn't been in a car. The guy did tell me it smoked, so I know it smoked. He said it did run. So what we're gonna do, what we're gonna talk about is we're gonna do a leak down test on this engine to see how much leak down it has. I've already actually done it, but I'm gonna show you guys how to do it and what to look for. So when you do a leak down, it's different than a compression test. A leak down consists of 2 gauges. One that's hooked up to the cylinder directly, which is what this hose is for. And then you add compressed air into it. Your compressed air is going to be through here, through a regulator. And you can control how much air you put in. I'm lazy. I don't like to do a lot of math. So what I do is I try to run 100 psi in here, so I don't have to do any calculations, so I know what my leak down test is. If you put 100 psi on this gauge, and you've got 100 psi on this gauge, which you won't, but if you had 100 psi, you've got a perfect engine. There's no leak down at all. Leak down meaning air, compressed air, or combustion air going through rings, intake valves, or exhaust valves. This is handy. This, and they're not that much. You go to Amazon, you can pick these up for, I think I paid, I don't know, $100 for this one. It may have been even cheaper than that, but $100, you get a decent compression test. Can only tell you so much, but a leak down test with this tool, I can find whether you've got blown head gaskets, cracked heads, bad intake valves, bad exhaust valves, bad rings. And I'm going to show you how you do it. So, and we're going to do it on this engine that's on a test stand. I've already leaked down the engine in the 55, as suspected. It's like the compression. It's dismal. It's terrible leak down. Now, what I found there was that it's 90% rings. There's small leak down through the exhaust valves, from what I found, but most of it's coming out the rings, and I'll show you how to find out where it's coming from when we do this test. But that sucks because, again, it's rings. If it's rings, your heads are coming off, you're looking at machine work to bore, you're gonna have to bore the cylinders. You may get by with a dingle ball hone, quick hone, we'll see. But let's get on to this compression test, and I'll show you what to look for. When you got your engine on the test stand, or if it's in the car, what you're gonna want to do is you're going to want to get number 1 piston at top dead center. Small block Chevy, it's going to be this piston, top dead center. on compression stroke. Now when you're on top dead center, this one's top dead center compression stroke, because you can tell the valves are not compressed at all. You know, basically they're both closed. Intake and exhaust valve are closed. This is pointing to number 1 cylinder. Now you might look at this and say, no, that's wrong. Because Small Block Chevy, when you go to top dead center on number 1, this should point to the number 1 cylinder. Well, that is the case with most Small Block Chevys. Most. This particular engine, the 265, you're going to be pointing at number 2 cylinder. There's a reason for that. Is one, this vacuum advance, if you put that to number 1, this vacuum advance will be not in a good area to where you can adjust it to get your timing in. Second thing is a 265. Now remember this, in 55 and 56, they had a completely different oiling system than a regular small block Chevy. In 55 and 56, they used the gear on your distributor as part of the oil pump to pump. You have, it's not a constant pressure oil pump. It's variable, so it's like every other time. That's why if you change a cam in a 265 and you just go buy a small block cam, you're gonna have issues. You're not gonna have oil pressure. If I pull this cam out, and I'm gonna pull this cam out because that's where we're headed with this. I already know, I've already done leak down, but when you pull the cam out and you look at the back of the cam, there's actually a galley, or a whatever you'd want to call it, and that's for oil pressure. There's a cut in the back of that cam to where it gets oil, and that's actually flows your oil through. So anyway, back to the leak down. I know I'm on top dead center, number 1. You can also, in this particular motor, you can look in and you can see that the piston's right there. And I'm lined up on 0. So I'm top dead center. So I'm gonna hook up my hose to the spark plug hole, number 1 cylinder. And this is all the leak down test is you're gonna hook this up, make sure it's nice and tight. We're gonna hook the hose up to the gauge, and then we're gonna add compressed air here to our gauge. Now my regulator's all the way down. So if you look at this, this is part of the tester. It's got a whole little finagle here on, if you look real close. So here's your left-hand gauge reading. If you're 100 PSI and you're reading 99 on the right-hand gauge, you got 1% leak down. Okay, that's a great motor. If you got 1% leak down, you're golden. But you can also, if your compressor won't go up to 100, say you can only get 75 PSI, it has the thing. As you go through, read the right-hand gauge, it'll tell you. But I'm lazy. I actually like math, but I don't like to do it all that much, if that makes any sense. So I try to go right to 100 PSI. In this particular motor, it's not going to matter. You'll see how much leak down is in it, and there's a lot. We'll run it up to 100. I just shut my compressor off so it wouldn't kick on. So we might not get all the way to 100. It's not going to matter. But if in a perfect world, run her to 100, see what you're reading, and the difference is what your leak down is. So here we go. We're going to run this up. And you can hear already. Okay. 100 PSI right there. Tap the gauges a little bit, make sure they're solid. We're showing 34 PSI. What does that mean? It means we've got 66, 76, 86, 90, 66% leak down. 66% of the combustion air in here is leaking past where it should. Unacceptable. No wonder. I mean, this engine ran. That car was about the same. So let's do a quick test here. How do you know where, like I said, how do you know it's an exhaust fan, an exhaust or intake valve or rings? You want to use your ear. What you're going to do is open that up and listen for air. So I'm telling you right now, there's hardly any air coming through here. If you had a bad intake valve, you would get air coming out your carburetor. If you've got a bad exhaust valve, you will hear air coming out your exhaust. And right here, you can't feel it. There's a tiny bit, but it's not bad. If you want to know its rings, here's what you do. Hear that difference? I don't know if you can hear that on video. You can hear that air coming out. You put your ear right up here, you can actually feel air coming out of here. That is the compressed air in the cylinder going past the rings, filling up the block, coming out the breather tube. So, what is that telling us? It's telling us we've got bad rings in this engine. This engine's in the same boat as that engine. It was in a 56 Chevy wagon and it sat for a very long time. I suspect the rings are bound up because it sat so long. With the oil in them, they just have seized up onto that cylinder, the piston rather, and so they're not sealing. If we could start this up and get it running and get everything heat and do that a few times, get some heat cycles through here, that may break them loose. Throw some engine restore in or something, you may be able to break that loose. Is it ever going to be a great running engine? No, it's not. You may have enough power to cruise it around the neighborhood and go to some parades and that, but it's never going to be that great of an engine, especially when you have as much leak down as this did. So let's move on quickly. Let me show you how. So that's number one cylinder on a leak down test. What you want to do now is you want to rotate this over according to the firing order. So you'll go through, and the next one on a small block Chevy is cylinder 8. So we're going to want to rotate this over, and I'll do that. We'll do it on video here so that you can know. And I actually tightened this belt a little bit. I've got no plugs in this engine, so it rotates pretty easy. Number 8, small block Chevy, 2468-1357. All small block Chevys. So we're going to rotate this around, and I'm just going up until I see that cylinder go to the very top and stop, and it'll stay there for a bit. Now we're top dead center, compression stroke on number 8 because of the firing order. 184. So we're gonna plug this in just like we did on the number 1 cylinder, and you can easily do this in the car. And this works. This leak down works for actually anything. It'll work for new cars, fuel injected cars. Even if you've got injectors in each port, this leak down test can tell you whether you got a cracked head. It could tell you if you've got bad intake valves, bad exhaust valves. What you will, instead of listening for air to come out the carburetor, you're going to just pop off your air intake duct and listen. If you got air coming out of there, you got a bad intake valve, or you've got a bad head gasket or cracked head that's leaking into the intake area. So these are great tools to have. We're gonna hook this up. Now I'm not gonna get 100 PSI on this one because, like I said, my compressor's off. We'll run it up and I'll just show you how it's not that much different than the other one. Look at there. So I'm at 85 on the left-hand gauge and I'm reading 12. It's even worse. Even if you do the calculations, this cylinder is worse than the number 1 cylinder. Again, you can listen here. You can listen at the exhaust. Or you can listen here. This one is actually leaking out the PVC, or basically the breather again. It's rings on this one with a little more, and it's coming out the breather. So it's rings on this one also. I have done, so I'm not going to take you through. You guys get the idea of a leak down now. What you'll do, next one, you're going to rotate it over and do the next cylinder, check it all that way. I have done all 8 of these cylinders. All of them are coming out, the majority of it are rings. So, where does that leave us? You're not going to fix rings unless you tear apart the engine. So, where we're at with this engine, in the 55 and the 56 engine, what we decided we're going to do is we're going to pop the heads off. I'm going to start with this one first, just because it's on the engine stand. I'm going to pull the intake off. I'm going to pull the heads off. I'm going to look at the cylinders where I can actually visually see them. I'm going to look at how big the ridge is, and this is a budget build. We're not going, if we had all the unlimited resources as far as money goes, we'd probably restore this, and we're not restoring it to Concours. We're not even going to restore it to, we're planning on leaving the body the way it is. But we do want it reliable. We want it drivable, have good power, and of course we're going to make it brake good and stuff. The only way around this is, so we got 2 options. We either tear down one of these engines and make a good one, or we get another engine and put in it. I actually would really like to keep the 265 in it. I'm actually planning on running a 265 in my little 27 Essex over there. I actually bought this engine for that. And that one will, I'm actually going to go through a 265, rebuild it correctly. I'm going to put a good hotter cam in it for that Essex. But the 55 is a budget build. So we're going to tear this apart. And I'm going to see if we can fix the cylinders by just doing a quick budget build on a 265. 265 is not like any of your normal V8s out there. V8 Chevys, small block Chevys, they're cheap to rebuild. They're cheap to fix. Machining is where most your money is. 265 is not that way. They're more money to build. You get less power in the long run. People probably say I'm stupid to even go that route, but I like being abnormal. So that's what I'm doing. So we're going to try a budget build on this, and we'll go through the videos on it. But next step right now, 55 is just gonna have to sit for a bit. I got the passenger front door off, and I've sent that up to Logan, and my dad's gonna go through that. The window crank doesn't work. It doesn't open from the inside. The vent window doesn't work. So I took that up there. He likes to do that stuff. He likes to do the meticulous stuff, and so it's up there for him to play around with, and we'll see where he gets with it. Hopefully it's not so rusted that we can't get it fixed. It's a budget build. I don't want to go buy a bunch of regulators. But regulators for a 4-door Chevy, 55 Chevy, you're looking at like $1,000 for by the time you buy 4 regulators. And we're gonna try to fix what we got. So we're gonna tear this apart. I'm gonna try to do dingle ball budget restoration. I'll put rings on it. We'll go through and do some bearings. And I'll check all the clearances. We'll make sure. I'm really hoping that we don't have to take it to the machine shop. I'm hoping that I can hone it. I got my doubts. I have a ridge reamer. If there is a bad ridge, I'm hoping not to have to put pistons in it. That's where we're at right now. We'll see. We're not going to know until we get this all the way tore down. But that's where we're at. We've got 2 engines that are complete. They got bad compression and horrible leak down. I mean, you're talking 60%, 70% leak down through the rings. They need to be rebuilt. So that's where we're at. Next week, I'm hoping to get the heads off this, intake heads, have it down to the short block, and start looking at the cylinder walls and see if it's even viable to do a dingle ball hone and keep your fingers crossed. I'd really like to get this up and running. So that's the next step. This one's coming down. We'll evaluate it. The engine and the trans I've decided are coming out of the 55. So that's another next step. They will come out together, and then we'll build up one engine between the 2 and hook it up and slap it in, and then we'll take it for a spin. But it's going to be a few weeks now. But I just wanted to give an update, show you guys how to do a leak down test. These things are really worth. If I had my option of whether I could buy a leak down tester or buy a compression tester, and I could only buy one, compression tester is quick and dirty. It'll tell you if you got compression or not. But the leak down test gives you so many more options of actually finding the leak. I mean, if you've got a cracked head, a blown head gasket, and that would have been great if 2 of these cylinders are bad, and you can find that somewhat on here. If you got 2 cylinders right next to each other that have no compression, you can kind of think it's probably a blown head gasket. The compression is going out the other cylinder. This will tell you for sure if that's the problem. So best case, get them both. But these are worth, I mean, I found a lot of engine problems with these. They're worth their weight in gold. But you do need a compressor to run them. So if you don't have a compressor, go with the compression gauge. But so until next time, if you like what you see and you want to see, I think I had a comment talking about how oddball these 265 engines are, and that he'd like to see more stuff on them. There isn't that much stuff on YouTube. And I agree with them. They're an oddball engine. Not many people do anything with them. Probably a reason for that. But there's also a lot of purists out there that want to stick with it. And so we'll go through and show. We'll show. I mean, I've got two engines that will be built. One's going to be a quick budget build. So we'll do a budget build series on the 265. And then there's going to be one that's built for the hot rod, and that one will be built with performance in mind, bigger cam, but it's going to be like 50s performance. Not gonna go all out and you know, have 10 grand into it, but it's gonna be like someone in the 50s come across a wrecked 56 Chevy and went through it, hopped it up for his hot rod. That's what we're going for. So anyway, if you like what you see, subscribe, hit the notifications button. Trying to do at least a video a week. So I didn't think I was going to get this one in, but I had a little bit of time today, so we did. And I'm hoping to get another video in next week. It's going to be tight, but my real job's taking me places that it's going to take a lot of my time. So hopefully we get another video in. Till then, keep watching. Appreciate you guys' support, and we'll see you later.